Let's get down to business. So question and answer session with Police Chief Kristen Ziman. So I'm going to stop sharing my my screen and introduce Aurora Police Chief Kristen Ziman. Joined the Aurora Police Force in 1994 as a sworn officer and worked in patrol, field training, community policing, and investigations as a domestic violence detective before being promoted to sergeant in 2003. She was then promoted to lieutenant in 2008, to commander in 2010, and was named police chief in 2016. So she holds a bachelor's degree from Aurora University and a master's from Boston University. Been in a number of executive education programs at Kellogg, at Harvard, is now attending Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, pursuing a second master's degree in security and defense. Of course, Chief Ziman and her team are famous, receiving national acclaim for their response to an active shooter on February 15th, 2019 in Aurora, and now, of course, are dealing with these ongoing protests. So, Chief Ziman, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, of course. So, what's not in those bio points that you would like everybody to know about you?
Not in those bio. That's probably that I'm addicted to education, as you can, although that probably shows up in those bio points. I'm just constantly craving that. I think it's maybe perhaps because I didn't go away to college. I started as a police cadet in my department at 17. And so I went back to school and, I wasn't a really great student in high school. And so I caught the education bug later in life, and I haven't been able to stop that. And I'm a big Apple fanatic. Love Apple products. That's about the only thing.
Okay. So an Apple fanatic. Did you know that Normandy, France is like one of the Apple capitals of the world?
No, I did not know that. No.
Right. And so Nicole and I, we'll talk about this at the end, but Nicole and I are doing a 76th anniversary of D-Day leadership and Normandy wine, spirits, and chow special on Saturday.
No kidding.
Yeah, quick plug on that. So if you love apples, you'll love Normandy. So, Chief, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, of course, is the recent protests against racial injustice. So what's the situation that you're finding in Aurora?
Sure. So, obviously we're coming out of, everyone stay-at-home orders and COVID, and then this challenge coming forward, which, I perfectly understand that it's bubbling over, and it took this one incident to be the proverbial straw. And especially in policing, when you look at the death of George Floyd and how it has spread throughout our country and beyond, people are incensed with the injustices, and so I very much understand it. I will say it's very difficult, and we were talking at the onset that it's difficult to be the face of policing, especially in my city, and to take that anger from all of our community members. Even though this didn't happen in Aurora, it most certainly manifests in all of our cities across the nation, as we have seen. And so I think that aside from the rioting and the unrest, I think this is the protests, the peaceful protests, and the messages that need to be sent for reform are loud and clear. And I really believe that, especially in law enforcement, we have that tendency to have that thin blue line mentality, which is blind loyalty. And I have no use for blind loyalty. And I think it's time now that officers from across the nation stand together and say, we will not tolerate this in our profession. And I think that's where change happens. So on one hand, I am so sad about, the violence that is occurring in our cities. But on the other hand, this is a narrative that needs to be, screamed from the rooftops.
Right. Edmund Burke once said that evil triumphs when good people look the other way. And you saw in the video where George Floyd was killed, 3 police officers looking on. And Aurora, under your leadership, has always had very high levels of accountability for conduct. What's your approach to that accountability, and also getting the buy-in that you've got from your department?
Absolutely. That is fortunately something that we've been working on, changing that culture for a very long time. Accountability to me is paramount, because if you do not trust your police, then we are ineffective. Then people will not turn to us. Number one, if they are victims of crimes, and that hurts us. We have to build that trust in our community. And so I've been the chief for 4 years now. And the first thing that I said to our officers is, I will stand with you when you are right, but I will part with you when you are wrong. And part of that accountability is not just words, but actions. And so we have really devoted a lot of action to that statement, in that we even terminated a police officer who did not commit the actual act of excessive force, but stood by, watched it, and then later was untruthful and said that he didn't see it, when he's clearly on camera watching it happen. And that is, kind of an ironic event, in that the person who was terminated was the one who was untruthful, saw it, didn't intervene. The one who actually committed the act, was given 60 days off. So, we are very swift and transparent in our accountability. And it is a message that has to be sent from the top down. It's not enough just to have policies in place, because it's very easy to say, thou shalt not commit excessive force, but what you tolerate, what you condone out there on the street by supervisors and beyond, is what sets the culture. And so I am very proud of my department, because we get more complaints filed on officers by supervisors than externally. And so that tells me that we are policing one another.
So there's everybody on this call are leaders, and they grapple with the same issue that you grapple with, which is, on the one hand, holding everybody accountable, and on the other hand, everybody's got to know that you've got their backs.
Yeah.
And if you can go on the extreme one way or another, and it creates all sorts of bad outcomes. What do you do to maintain that balance? What are some of your guideposts?
So it's interesting that you even made that statement, because after the riots that occurred in our city, it was Sunday night that our three squad cars were burned. Our entire downtown was shattered and is broken, and we're rebuilding. Well, as luck would have it, and I'm saying that in jest, I woke up yesterday morning to hear that an officer made an arrest on an African-American man at his home. And this is a white officer, and the arrest was justified. It was an arrest based on fireworks. He pulled onto the street. He saw two young children in the middle of the street lighting fireworks. And the father was at the house in the yard. He confronted the father, and he said, please, you can't have these kids shooting off fireworks. Number one, it's dangerous for them. Number two, fireworks are, it's a violation. And so he was just asking for his name and his ID, and his intention was to just give him a warning. And that man then refused to give his ID and refused to identify himself. And so then he was arrested for obstruction. So now consider this. This is a no-win situation. This is a Black man with his children. I get it. It is a violation. However, as I told the officer, in this moment, in this climate, perhaps discretion could have been used in that moment. Now, did he do anything wrong? Absolutely not. He followed the letter of the law. When he asked the individual for his ID, he said absolutely not, and then walked in the house, and went away, moved away from him. And again, it's a violation. So by the letter of the law, so I have to support my police officers, right? Because I have my police force saying, well, hold on, he didn't do anything wrong, but I invited the police officer in, and he just so happened to be the union president. So he's, the loudest one who is speaking, on behalf of our troops. And I sat down and I said, this is one of those moments, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we have to apply that discretion in a way that is the best outcome. And I said, in this particular incident, and I get it, he committed the act of obstruction, endangering children by letting them light fireworks off, but this could have been a situation where perhaps an education would have been better. So I had a lot of upset cops, because we sat with the officer and we determined that we would go ahead and drop the charges. And I said, this is not a reflection on you doing something wrong, but it is just stating to the community that, we are going to use discretion in this particular matter, so that we believe it is for the greater good at this time. And so to answer your question, that was a long way of saying communication. I have to sit down and I have to explain to the officers who get it. Like, listen, in this climate, you're right. You absolutely did nothing wrong, but was that arrest necessary in this moment in time? And I think that they understand that we are in this precarious position right now, and we just have to keep talking about it. They have to know my position is to keep community trust, and that benefits them. And also, that caused more rioting yesterday, so it's also on, for their safety as well, bigger picture here. So communication.
So you have a knack for, and a long history of putting together great teams, and this knack for putting the right people in the right position at the right time. So what's your secret?
It's diversity of thought, quite frankly. When I became chief, I was put in a position that was very fortunate, in that it doesn't happen very often when a police chief assumes a position. They typically get the command staff that is there, right? And so it's not like a CEO where the new team comes in, the new CEO comes in, you bring in your team. That's not how that works. These people have risen to these ranks, and so you have this command staff. Well, so at the time, I did not have a deputy chief. We hadn't had one in the budget, and so I asked for one. And then two of our commanders were of retirement, so they left. My chief retired, so I was in a position where I got to build my entire command staff. And so what I did was I looked at the people who were at the lieutenant and commander rank, at the lieutenant rank, and I said, which person has something that I don't? I'm really good with the community, but if you ask me to, look at a budget and try to figure out, number crunching and spreadsheets, I hand it back to you and just say, okay, tell me a story. So my deputy chief is a finance major. He's also an amazing human being, an amazing leader. And then, I picked another guy that just was very technically minded, and, brought that to the table. And so every single person brought something that I did not have. The only thing that they had in common is that they are compassionate leaders. And that was also very important to me. Not autocratic, but progressive minded, willing to take a risk and even potentially fail, just to try something new and different instead of the old, this is how we've always done it, which was, not to be disparaging, but the former command was very much in tradition, where these guys were very willing to be progressive. And so what that did for me was basically I was able to say, I'm not good at this. This is you. And then this synergy happened over the last 4 years, where everybody just clicked, and putting people in positions because they have expertise is just the brilliant thing to do. You are really good at this, so you need to do that job, and then get out of the way, let them do their jobs, and with the autonomy necessary. And that, I think, is the secret. And it's truly just making sure that you're not creating people in your own image,
Right. The Michelle Flournoy calls it the mini-me challenge, where we just tend to promote people like us. Mm-hmm. In the chat room, if you've got a question for Chief Ziman, just type it in the chat room, and Nicole will let me know that we've got an audience question. Chief, you gave me an example earlier about when you were a lieutenant and you first started this approach to diversity of thought.
So when I got promoted to lieutenant, I was placed on the midnight shift. And at that time, when you're the lieutenant on the midnight shift, you're the highest ranking person in the department, in the middle of the night. So I inherited this shift, and the chief had set expectations, on particular goals that we needed to reach. And it started to occur to me that we needed to look at what people's talents were. And the mindset was you have to do a little bit of everything. We had this, it was called the point system. And so if you made a traffic stop, you got a point. If you did X, you got this point. And it just occurred to me that we were just checking boxes and people were just accumulating points. And it really wasn't quality. It was all bean counting. So I sat the entire shift down or the supervisors of the shift who then communicated this. And I said, I want to try something different. I would like to try those people who like to enforce traffic laws. Let's let them do that. There are some people that are really good at DUI enforcement, all of the things that we have to do. Pick a thing that you enjoy doing and let's see what happens. Lot of opposition came to that. Of course, I didn't ask for permission. I decided to just, ask for forgiveness later if it didn't work. And what actually occurred, and I said, here's the only thing that you cannot do. You cannot say, I don't like to do anything. That is not an option. You have to do something. And so what happened was we had one particular couple officers that were really good at crime prevention. So they would go around the city and their entire job all night was to look for open garage doors or car windows that were down. And they would stop and notify the owner or put, a little note in the mailbox to say, hey, you left your car window down. And so what ultimately happened was every 2 weeks I had to go and report out at ComStat. So I would show up and my numbers were exploding. My shift was just absolutely killing it out there with as far as production and prevention and all of the above. And the chief's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm letting them do exactly the thing that they are good at. And again, still some pushback is like, well, that's not how that works. But the production is the natural consequence. And when I became a commander, I took it one step further. And I talked the chief into allowing the officers to choose their areas. At that point, their areas and districts. And at that point, it was just, we put them wherever we decided we were going to put them. And so when they are able to choose where they want to work, and for whatever reason it might be, the natural consequence is happier people are more productive people. And I almost feel like it's so simple, but we overcomplicate things. And so, and that's how I've been leading ever since, and it works.
Well, so what were the impacts of that diversity, whether on the February 15th active shooter incident or today?
Sure.
What are some of the impacts of that?
So the reason that we performed as well as we did that day, and if those of you who are not familiar, mass shooting on February 15th, 5 of my officers were shot, 5 people were killed. It was a workplace shooter, a disgruntled employee who was going to be terminated in the afternoon. And when the preparation, and this is the word that I continue to go back to, and it was, even in COVID when we sat down to prepare, and that's how, we exposed each other and contracted, it was in the preparation. But we are always preparing for the thing that may never happen, but it's in that preparation. We're always preparing, and I firmly believe that we fall to the level of our training, and so we were preparing. So I put the tactical operators in charge of our SWAT team. And of course, on the patrol side of the house, making sure that our training division was putting our officers through experiential training, scenario-based training. So instead of just saying, here's how you handle a mass shooting and watch this PowerPoint, is we're borrowing empty warehouses. Schools are, superintendents are letting us come in and do mock mass shootings. So we had been doing this for a long time. So what absolutely happened is the thing that we never expected to happen in our city, and a mass shooting happens. And I had the SWAT team commander come to me right after I became chief, and he said, "We've got a big problem." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "All of our equipment is expired. We don't have anything to defend ourselves should the unthinkable happen here." And I've never been on a tactical trajectory in my career. I was in domestic violence, as you mentioned. I was in community policing. I'm more of a project, oriented, community oriented kind of police officer. And so I wasn't a tactical person. So I don't know a whole lot of what they need. And I said, "Here's what I need from you. You just educate me. Tell me what flashbangs are and why you need them, because they're really expensive, because I have to sell that to my city council." I said, "Just let me know, educate me." And so they invited me to all the demos. And, I said, "All right, let's do it." So I talked city council into getting, everyone up to speed and the equipment that they needed. And then the unthinkable happens, and everyone just got into their expertise. And it's like, the Winston Churchill quote, that moment when you are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and asked to do a very special thing, fit to your skills and ability. How unfortunate is if you are unprepared in that moment. And they were all prepared because they had taken the time to do the preparation. And for me, all I did was say, "You just tell me what you need to do your job should this happen." And then again, you give them the autonomy. The other thing, and this is where we kind of fall, I'm not sure, I've never worked in corporate America, but in policing, we have such a chain of command that sometimes people get so bogged down in, you have to ask your superior who has to run it up the chain, run it up the flagpole. And sometimes you have to throw that out the window. And so what we did that day was, without even really realizing it was happening, it was after the fact, we learned that people started doing things that they didn't even really have the authority to do, but they just thought, "This needs to be done. So I'm going to get this done, and I'm going to do it." And later I was like, wow, you just, so it's not only did we have people doing the job that they were trained to do, but then we had other people recognizing a job needed to be done, and they just did it. And that is, you can't wait for people to ask permission when they know, common sense, this is what you need to do. So you need to empower your people to be able to make those decisions without having to ask permission. And all of that just came together, and our officers who responded to the gunfire saved so many lives that day. So many other people in that warehouse did not get killed because our officers kept running in one after another, and and got shot one after another. But our officers survived because they applied all the training, tourniquet training and first aid training, and it just, everything came together, and our officers survived. Sadly, we lost 5 people that day, but again, we would have lost a lot more but for their skills and ability.
So letting people work on their natural strengths and interests boost their engagement, boost their enthusiasm, they become more innovative, and you get all sorts of these positive synergies.
Mind-blowing, right? I mean, let people do the thing that is fit to their skills and ability. Now, that is not to say that you don't push people out of their comfort zone. There is absolutely something to cross-training, right? We can't have just this one person who can only do that thing. And so you absolutely have to cross-train people. And sometimes, as far as, development, you have to say, listen, for me, when I was a lieutenant, and he said, "Listen, you need to work in admin and you need to do the budget." And I was like, "No, please don't make me." But I had to learn how to do it. I hated every second of it. But now that was a gift he gave me to force me to do it. And now as the chief, I understand now, even though I'm not very good at it, but I understand the concept. But that has to be done too. So don't misunderstand that, you just let people do what they want to do. That's not necessarily true, but you find the skills and the talents, and you give them the job fit to that ability, and they perform.
Awesome. Nicole, I think we've got a few questions in the chat room.
We do, yeah. We have a couple of questions. I'll ask the first 2 and then go to the next one. The first question is from John. Many of your comments center on individual officers' ability to exercise judgment. Leadership development research shows that we can improve judgment through education and training. To that end, do you think formal or informal training about judgment? Do you do formal or informal training about judgment and building trust? And then the second question is, have you experienced bias because of your gender? If yes, how did you deal with it as the chief?
Sure. So when you talk about judgment, I mean, you're basically talking about decision making. You know, this is, and this is why I firmly believe you play like you practice. And a lot of the mistakes that are made on the street by police officers across the nation are because they have a lack of training. We give officers a gun and a badge, we send them to the academy, and a lot of departments do not train beyond that. They've gone to the academy, they're a certified police officer. So judgment and decision making, those skills are honed by using them, simply by using them. And so that's when I'm going back to scenario-based experiential training. It is not enough to tell police officers, you know, in a PowerPoint that this is how you deal with a shooting. This is how you deal with a forcible felony. You have to set the scenario for a forcible felony, because what will happen is all of that adrenaline that comes in the moment and stress, and any police officer can attest to this. It's even our trainings are so scary. I mean, I go through them myself just because I want to experience them, and it feels so real. You know, we pull a squad car onto our range and we turn off all the lights and we mimic a shooting. We use simunitions, which are obviously, we don't use real bullets when we're training. So we use simunitions, and we put officers, we actually look at what other police departments have been through, or even headlines, even when police officers do something wrong, and we take that and we emulate it in a controlled environment. And the more they do it, then on the street, if they're going to go back to that muscle memory, and you do play like you practice. So if that answers your question, I know I'm answering kind of on the tactical end of it, but the only way to become skilled at judgment is to continue to make decisions. After every scenario, we debrief. Why did you do that? Why did that person was handcuffed? You know, at what point did you feel the need to do what you did in that moment? So we also build in de-escalation to every scenario, so that you took that one step further. That person, you know, capitulated, put their hands up, and you did this, why? And then we make them explain, and then we go through it again. That is what builds good decision-making and good judgment. I know I talk really fast. And then the second question, gender bias, absolutely. I write a blog, I keep a blog, and one of the things that I have written about is exactly that. You know, I'm 5'4", and when I first came on the job, you know, 115 pounds soaking wet. And people have always sized me up by the way that I look and by my gender. And it happens not only by police officers, but by my superiors and people out on the street. And I'll give you just a couple really great examples. I'll give you an example, one from right when I started, and one that just happened to me. I was with my field training officer. I was in my 3rd month of the program, doing really good, getting great scores. And my lieutenant sat us both down, my field training officer and I, and he looked at my training officer and he said, yeah, he's looking at the paperwork, and he said, yeah, looks like she's doing a real good job. But, you know, have you gotten her in a fight yet? Can she hold her own out there? And it was funny because I'm like, I'm right here. Like, you know, he's talking as though I'm not in the room. And my field training officer, who happened to be a male, said, actually, she has not gotten in a fight because she keeps talking people into handcuffs, which is exactly what we want. But I imagine he's never asked a male officer, so have we gotten him into a fight yet, to see if he can hold his own? And so I remember just sitting there going, wow, this is incredible. I've walked onto scenes and had even, you know, women say, well, what do you think you're going to do here? You know, you're not going to be able to handle this situation, you know, and I always come back with a retort, you know, that's kind of scrappy, you know, and, you know, I'm like, I'm tougher than I look, or something like that. And to that end, and I will have to say, in my department, it probably hasn't been as much of a challenge, because I've been there for 26 years as a sworn officer, 29 years with my cadet years. So I've built the trust and the credibility in my own department. So no problems there. But I just applied to become the superintendent of Chicago Police Department, and I made it to the final 3. And before making it to the final 3, I had to interview with the Chicago Police Board, and there were 9 people, and 2 people asked the question, look at you, how can you lead these policemen? Sorry, I thought I lost you guys. And I remember sitting there thinking, my gosh, I have 26 years of being a police officer, 4 years of leading, and 10 years in command. And their question was, you don't have the command presence to lead the Chicago Police Department. And I thought, I'm never going to shake this. It's gender. It's alive and well.
Chief, that is extraordinary. We could do this for hours and listen to your leadership insights. Your department, of course, is so fortunate to have you, and the community of Aurora is so fortunate to have you as the chief of police. And I just really thank you for your time and your insights. It's been absolutely invaluable. I really, really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me a platform to talk about it.
Of course. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we are going to do some more of these famous pictures. So which picture best describes your top takeaway from today's discussion? Which picture best describes your top takeaway from today's discussion? Go ahead and put in the chat room the picture and brief description of what it means to you. Which picture best describes your top takeaway from today's discussion? Okay, Nicole, what you got in the chat room?
Eric said the overlapping color circles, diversity of thought and collaboration brings out our best. Todd said the target training needs to be realistic and on target. David, the mountains, successful leadership is not only hard to achieve, but it's also easy to fall off of. And Tom said the eye, it represents wisdom. The chief has a lot of wisdom. And then do we have time for one more question?
Of course.
Okay. I don't want to forget about one question here. In typical business structures, there's a clear system of reporting and accountability, but in others, while on paper it exists, in reality it's more complex. You seem to have the latter, multiple stakeholders, including the public that you have to respond to. Any lessons learned and how to balance that dynamic?
I think complete transparency. I think that's one of the, to accountability, it's not enough just to say that we have these policies and procedures in place. You have to set the culture that, we literally, walk the talk. And, one of the ways to do that is to have constant communication and transparency with our stakeholders in our city, and also let them know that, we make mistakes. And sadly, when a police officer makes a mistake, it's not typically a minor one. It's something that's going to make headlines, even a life will be lost. And so that's part of the reason why you have to devote so much time and energy to training and resources as well. Money, and it's the return on your investment. And so, I think balancing that is, you have to be able to stand up and say, we could have done better in this particular instance. And I think that's part of building that accountability and that balance between our community and, and police officers as well, is just honest conversations about, how we're not perfect, but, hopefully the mistakes we make are not fatal mistakes.
Fantastic. Transparency, another great example. And Colleen, who asked that question, sends her thanks to you for your insight. Okay, so of course, as people are leading through what's now a sort of a threefold crisis: pandemic, economic shutdown, and now the protests, they start to feed on one another. We continue to put together resources to help you think through this guidance or think through this situation and lead your team back to success. So all of that's all over our website. Tons of free content for you. For those who want to do a strategy call, there's a link to do a strategy call with me, and what we'll focus on is getting you results, solving problems, overcoming obstacles. So if you want to do one of these 30-minute strategy calls with me, then just go to the link. We'll ask you to write down your goals and what obstacles you're facing. You'll schedule a time that works for you, and then I'll give you a number of piece of advice points on how to deal with the exact problems that you're facing. And of course, it's just something that myself and everybody at Strategic Leaders Academy loves to do. Finally, I mentioned earlier, Saturday is the 76th anniversary of D-Day. And since nobody can travel to Normandy for the anniversary, we are going to bring Normandy to you. So myself and Nicole are going to talk about leadership insights from D-Day on the 76th anniversary. And Nicole, who's also a certified wine expert, is going to talk about Normandy food and beverages and the proper tasting and pairing notes. And we will also talk about my D-Day friend, Ray Lambert, who is 99 years young as we speak. So that'll be Saturday. You've got that link there. Feel free to email me if you can't do the screen capture and want me to send you the link. We would love to see you on Saturday, 5 p.m. Central. Once again, thank you everybody for your participation. Chief Ziman, thank you so much for these extraordinary insights. We wish you and your team to be safe and healthy as you keep the community of Aurora safe and set a great example for the rest of us throughout the country. I'll stand by for questions. Otherwise, thank you so much. And thanks, Chief. That was terrific.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.